The 1970s in America were a time of cultural change, but also a period where fear of the unknown haunted the nation. Across the country, stories of missing young women began to surface, often dismissed as runaways at first, until the pattern became impossible to ignore. In this uneasy climate, Ted Bundy appeared as a man who seemed to embody charm, intelligence, and ambition. With his law school education, polished manners, and boyish good looks, Bundy was someone who blended easily into society. He was the type of man who parents welcomed into their homes, the kind of boyfriend young women introduced proudly to their friends. Yet beneath that carefully crafted facade lurked a darkness that even those closest to him could not have imagined. He carried within him an insatiable hunger, one that would lead him to become one of the most notorious serial killers in American history, a predator who could walk unnoticed in the daylight. His duality of warmth on the outside and brutality hidden just beneath became the mask that fooled nearly everyone who crossed his path. It was this mask that made him not only lethal, but unforgettable in the annals of true crime. The first hints of Bundy's hidden nature emerged in subtle ways. Friends noticed how he could manipulate situations to his advantage, how he seemed to study people with an almost clinical detachment, as though they were puzzles to be solved. He learned early that charm could be wielded like a weapon, that a smile could disarm suspicion, and that trust could be gained in moments only to be shattered later. In public, he was attentive, intelligent, and helpful. In private, his darker urges began to gnaw at him. By the early 1970s, Bundy had already started exploring the impulses that would define his crimes: voyeurism, stalking, and fantasies of power over women. No one suspected that the man studying law and volunteering in political campaigns was also beginning to act out these urges in secret. This contrast between public image and private obsession would form the backbone of his monstrous double life. As disappearances increased across Washington, Oregon, Utah, and Colorado, few connected the dots. Ted Bundy's mask was firmly in place, and it made him invisible to those searching for the monster who walked among them. Bundy's early life offered glimpses into the complex psychological storm that brewed within him. Born in 1946, he grew up believing his grandparents were his parents and that his mother was his sister, a confusion that left deep scars on his sense of identity. His childhood was marked by secrecy, discipline, and an internal struggle to belong. Though outwardly polite and intelligent, Bundy displayed troubling behaviors in his youth: stealing, spying, and an inability to form lasting connections. He idolized control and craved validation, yet often felt rejected or inferior. These fractures in his development planted seeds that later grew into his manipulative tendencies. By the time he entered college, Bundy had already learned to craft personas to fit whatever situation he desired, seamlessly shifting from shy student to charming companion. He could read people, mirroring their emotions and desires, creating an illusion of understanding and safety. But behind the mirror was emptiness, an insatiable void he could not fill with normal relationships or achievement. Instead, his hunger grew darker, pushing him toward fantasies that blurred the line between love, possession, and violence. The boy who once longed for acceptance was transforming into a predator. By his college years, Bundy's ability to live a double life became more refined. On one hand, he was a student who impressed professors and mingled with classmates. On the other, he was a young man growing obsessed with control and dominance. His romantic relationships were often intense and volatile. He charmed women easily but struggled with rejection, taking it as a personal humiliation rather than a natural part of life. The end of one particular relationship with a sophisticated woman who embodied success and social status left a deep wound. Bundy felt emasculated and inadequate, sparking feelings of rage that simmered beneath the surface. This rejection became a turning point, as many of his later victims resembled this former lover in appearance and demeanor. Outwardly, Bundy tried to mask his feelings by throwing himself into politics, volunteering on campaigns, and projecting an image of ambition. Inwardly, however, his fantasies were intensifying. He began experimenting with peeping, theft, and rehearsing scenarios where he lured women into vulnerable positions. These rehearsals became the groundwork for the calculated strategies he would later employ in his abductions. The stage was being set for his transformation into a killer. Bundy's hunting techniques were as calculated as they were chilling. He knew that his appearance made people trust him, and he weaponized that trust. He often faked injuries, wearing slings or hobbling on crutches to appear vulnerable. Women, eager to help, would assist him with lifting books, carrying packages, or moving items into his car. Once close enough, Bundy would overpower them, quickly shifting from helpless to predator. His Volkswagen Beetle became a trap on wheels, modified to disable door handles so that victims could not escape once inside. He stalked college campuses, libraries, and parking lots, carefully selecting his targets, young women with long hair parted in the middle, a detail eerily consistent with his victim pool. To law enforcement, the disappearances seemed random, but Bundy's methodical approach left a signature hidden in plain sight. Each victim represented more than an individual. They were pieces of a pattern that law enforcement struggled to see until it was too late. For Bundy, these acts were not impulsive, but rehearsed performances, executed with precision. He thrived on the illusion of control, savoring the moments where his charm disarmed suspicion before his violence shattered lives. As disappearances mounted, fear began to spread across college campuses in Washington and Oregon. Young women were vanishing without a trace, leaving behind books, purses, or cars with keys still in the ignition. Students were warned not to walk alone at night, to be cautious of strangers offering help, yet the abductions continued. A chilling sense of vulnerability crept through the Pacific Northwest. As communities realized these were not isolated cases, women began cutting their hair, changing their routines, and locking their dorms more carefully. Yet the shadow remained. Parents called their daughters nightly, praying to hear their voices. The media covered the disappearances with growing alarm, though authorities hesitated to connect the dots publicly, fearing panic. For those living in the region, the fear was suffocating. It was the realization that the predator was not a faceless stranger lurking in dark alleys, but someone who could stand beside you in daylight, smile, and appear completely ordinary. Bundy fed on this anonymity, blending seamlessly into the backdrop of everyday life, while his crimes left ripples of terror that changed the way women lived, studied, and even trusted others. For law enforcement, the case was a nightmare. Unlike many criminals who left clear evidence or predictable patterns, Bundy was meticulous. He left behind few traces, no fingerprints, no witnesses, no obvious motives. Investigators were forced to rely on circumstantial connections, comparing notes across states as disappearances spread. The lack of centralized databases and communication between jurisdictions in the 1970s made it even harder to track a killer who moved frequently. Detectives interviewed hundreds of suspects, yet Bundy often slipped under the radar because he did not fit the stereotype of a violent predator. He was clean-cut, articulate, and polite during questioning. Officers recalled leaving interviews feeling uneasy, but without enough evidence to detain him. Meanwhile, the number of victims grew. Families were left in torment, investigators in frustration, and communities in fear. The cunning with which Bundy operated left law enforcement always a step behind, chasing shadows while the killer moved forward. His intelligence, combined with his ability to manipulate appearances, allowed him to remain hidden in plain sight, exploiting every gap in the system designed to catch him. Bundy's double life only deepened the deception. To acquaintances, he was a devoted boyfriend, a promising law student, and a charming companion at social events. To his victims, he was a predator lying in wait. He could attend dinners with friends, help colleagues with assignments, or spend weekends with his girlfriend, then disappear into the night to stalk and kill. This ability to compartmentalize his life made him all the more terrifying. People who knew him personally could not reconcile the image of the attentive, witty young man with the possibility of monstrous acts. Bundy seemed to thrive on this duality, enjoying the thrill of maintaining control in both worlds. He became skilled at using those close to him as alibis, creating layers of deception that shielded him from suspicion. Even when whispers began to circulate that he matched the description of a suspect, dark hair, attractive, driving a Volkswagen Beetle. Those who knew him dismissed the possibility outright. His charm was his shield, and it blinded not only his friends but also investigators searching desperately for answers. Bundy's crimes eventually extended beyond state lines, making him one of the first modern serial killers whose activities spanned multiple jurisdictions. He moved from Washington to Utah, then to Colorado and Idaho, leaving a trail of victims behind him. Each move gave him a fresh start, as local authorities were often unaware of the larger pattern connecting the disappearances. His shifting identities, frequent relocations, and ability to appear ordinary made him nearly impossible to track. Bundy even inserted himself into the investigations, following news coverage and occasionally attending search efforts for his own victims. This sadistic curiosity further highlighted his arrogance and belief in his own invincibility. For him, killing was not only an act of violence, but also a game of dominance over society itself. By evading capture, he confirmed his superiority in his own mind. The multi-state nature of his crimes overwhelmed law enforcement agencies, who struggled with limited communication and resources. The killer was always moving, always adapting, and always staying one step ahead. The result was a growing body count and a chilling realization that no community was safe. Bundy's first significant brush with law enforcement came in Utah in 1975 when he was arrested for possession of burglary tools after a suspicious traffic stop. A police officer noticed his Volkswagen Beetle contained a ski mask, gloves, rope, and handcuffs, items too sinister to be explained away as mere coincidence. Investigators began to dig deeper, and connections to missing women emerged. For those who knew Bundy, the news was shocking. How could the polite law student who attended dinners and campaigned for political candidates be accused of such crimes? The disbelief was so strong that even some detectives initially hesitated to push harder, fearing they were targeting the wrong man. Yet as evidence mounted, Bundy's facade began to crack. His name surfaced in witness descriptions, and his car matched the vehicle seen near multiple abduction sites. Though still lacking definitive proof, law enforcement now had their first real suspect. Bundy was no longer just a phantom haunting communities. He was a man with a face, a name, and a mask that had begun to slip. The hunt was intensifying, and Bundy knew his freedom was under threat. Despite his arrest, Bundy's cunning allowed him to continue his campaign of deception. While awaiting trial for kidnapping charges in Colorado, he managed to escape custody not once, but twice. His first escape came when he leapt from a courthouse window, vanishing into the mountains before being recaptured days later. His second was even more audacious. He starved himself to fit through a hole he had carved in the ceiling of his cell, slipping into the jailer's apartment and walking out undetected. These escapes cemented Bundy's reputation as not only dangerous but incredibly resourceful. The public was horrified that such a predator could walk free again, while law enforcement was humiliated. Bundy relished these escapes, viewing them as victories over a system he believed himself smarter than. Yet each escape also fueled his compulsions, pushing him to kill again with renewed ferocity. He could not resist the hunger that had driven him for years, and soon after his final escape, his crimes escalated to some of the most brutal acts he had ever committed. The mask was thinning, but Bundy was still on the hunt. Bundy's return to killing after his escapes was marked by an even greater brutality. No longer as careful, he attacked openly and savagely. His most infamous spree occurred in Florida in January 1978, when he broke into the Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University. In the early hours of the morning, he bludgeoned and strangled multiple women, leaving behind a scene of horror that shocked the nation. Unlike his earlier calculated abductions, this attack was brazen, reckless, and filled with rage. It revealed a man unraveling, driven by impulses he could no longer fully control. The murders at Chi Omega sent shockwaves through Florida and beyond, drawing national attention to the case. For the first time, the public saw Bundy not as a phantom, but as a monster capable of unthinkable violence. The killings also marked the beginning of the end for Bundy. His arrogance, his need to dominate, and his belief that he could outsmart everyone had led him into the spotlight. Law enforcement now had a trail of blood leading directly to him, and the nation demanded justice. Bundy's final arrest came shortly after the Florida killings, when he was pulled over by police driving a stolen car. Inside were stolen credit cards, IDs, and evidence linking him to further crimes. This time, the authorities knew exactly who they had, and Bundy could no longer hide behind his charm. His trial for the Chi Omega murders became a national spectacle, the first to be broadcast widely on television. Crowds gathered outside courthouses, while millions watched at home as the once charming law student transformed into a defendant in shackles. The media frenzy turned Bundy into a twisted celebrity, with some women even writing to him in admiration, captivated by his looks and intelligence, despite the brutality of his crimes. Bundy seemed to thrive on the attention, smirking for cameras and treating the courtroom like a stage. He defended himself at times, cross-examining witnesses and engaging in theatrics designed to delay proceedings. But beneath the performance, the evidence was overwhelming. The mask that had once shielded him was now shattering under the weight of undeniable proof. In court, Bundy manipulated the system to the very end. He studied legal proceedings with intensity, exploiting loopholes and delays whenever possible. He charmed some jurors and baffled others, presenting himself as both victim and advocate. In one shocking moment, he proposed marriage to a former co-worker during his trial, exploiting a Florida law that allowed a courtroom marriage declaration to stand as legally binding. The stunt shocked observers, demonstrating his ability to twist even the most serious situations into games of manipulation. Yet the overwhelming weight of testimony, forensic evidence, and eyewitness accounts painted a portrait too vivid to deny. Bundy's theatrics could not erase the horror of the crimes he committed. Survivors testified with courage, describing the attacks and the terror they endured. Families of victims sat in grief, watching the man responsible play games with their pain. Despite his attempts to sway the proceedings, the jury saw through his charade. Bundy was convicted of the Chi Omega murders and sentenced to death, a ruling that marked the beginning of his final chapter. Bundy's sentencing marked a historic moment not only for the justice system but also for the American public. For the first time, the full weight of his crimes was laid bare in a courtroom that millions had followed through television broadcasts and headlines. The verdict resonated far beyond Florida, as survivors from Washington, Oregon, Utah, and Colorado watched justice being served for the horrors he had inflicted across multiple states. Yet even as the death sentence was announced, Bundy appeared unshaken, as though he still believed he could outmaneuver the system. His attorneys filed endless appeals, citing procedural errors and attempting to stall the inevitable. Bundy himself became his own best advocate, flooding courts with filings and leveraging his legal knowledge to prolong the process. Each delay was another chance for him to remain in control, to keep his name in the headlines, and to maintain his grip on those who studied him. For families of the victims, every delay felt like salt in an open wound. Still, the finality of the death sentence offered hope that, at last, justice was closing in on a man who had thrived on eluding it for so long. As the years passed, Bundy's notoriety grew rather than diminished. Television crews, journalists, and true crime authors all sought interviews, eager to capture the voice of America's most infamous killer. Bundy exploited this attention, granting carefully controlled conversations where he alternated between denial, charm, and partial admissions. Some professionals hoped to uncover the psychology behind his violence, while others aimed simply to profit from his name. Bundy played them all, tailoring his words to fit his audience. With law enforcement, he dangled confessions, admitting to murders only when it suited him, often leaving out crucial details to maintain leverage. With journalists, he portrayed himself as a misunderstood figure, a tragic man undone by forces beyond his control. This manipulative dance kept him relevant, but it also exposed his inability to show genuine remorse. Even in prison, stripped of freedom and awaiting execution, Bundy's need to dominate others never waned. For those studying him, it was a chilling reminder that his true prison was not the cell around him, but the endless hunger within him, a hunger that had driven him to kill and that he carried until the very end. Bundy's final years on death row were marked by manipulation until the very end. He granted interviews, speaking with journalists, psychologists, and law enforcement officers, often using these opportunities to portray himself as misunderstood or to withhold information in exchange for favors. In the days leading up to his execution, he began confessing to more murders, revealing details long suspected but never proven. These confessions were often given selectively, ensuring he maintained control over what was revealed and when. To investigators, his words were both valuable and frustrating, offering closure in some cases while leaving others unanswered. Bundy remained a master manipulator, dangling truths like bait even as the clock ticked down toward his execution. For the families of victims, his confessions were a final cruelty, confirming the worst, but never providing the full scope of his crimes. He admitted to killing more than 30 women, though many believe the real number was far higher. His final days revealed not remorse, but a continued hunger for control, even from behind bars. On January 24, 1989, Ted Bundy's life came to an end in Florida's electric chair. Crowds gathered outside the prison, some holding signs, others chanting, as if his execution marked the victory of good over evil. For many, it was a moment of closure, a symbolic end to a nightmare that had haunted them for over a decade. Reporters described the atmosphere as almost celebratory, with people cheering as news of his death spread. Inside, Bundy's final words were vague, offering no real apology, only a hollow statement of love to those closest to him. His execution marked the end of one of America's most infamous killers, yet it did not erase the pain of his victims' families. Still, it sent a message that justice, though delayed, had been served. Bundy's death was not just the execution of a man, but the closing of a chapter in American history, one that forced the country to confront the face of evil hidden in plain sight. Even decades after his death, Bundy's story continues to haunt and fascinate. He remains a figure studied by criminologists, psychologists, and historians as a case study in manipulation, psychopathy, and the dangers of trusting appearances. His crimes forever changed the way law enforcement handled serial cases, leading to improved coordination between states and the eventual development of databases like the FBI's VICAP. For the public, Bundy serves as a reminder that evil often wears a mask of normalcy, hiding in plain sight until it is too late. His story warns against complacency, against assuming that danger can be recognized at a glance. The women whose lives he stole are remembered not only in the pain of their families, but also in the lessons society has learned. Bundy's legacy is not his charm or his manipulation, but the enduring reminder of the human cost of his crime. The fascination with his story reflects humanity's struggle to understand the incomprehensible, to reconcile the image of a smiling young man with the monster that lurked beneath. Bundy's tale is one of deception, manipulation, and destruction, but it is also a story of resilience. Survivors who escaped him found the courage to testify, to share their trauma, and to help bring him to justice. Families of the victims fought tirelessly to keep his crimes in the public eye, ensuring that the women lost were never reduced to footnotes in his story. Their strength stands as the true legacy against Bundy's violence. His life may serve as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked charm and the blindness of a society eager to believe appearances, but it also underscores the resilience of those left behind. In the end, Bundy was not the charming student, the aspiring lawyer, or the handsome face that many first saw. He was the predator behind the mask, a man whose name will forever be synonymous with terror. His downfall, his exposure, and his execution remind us that even the most convincing masks eventually slip, revealing the truth beneath. And in that revelation lies the only form of justice for those whose lives he stole.